Good afternoon, everybody. Your Royal Highness. Thank you very much to the conference organisers for allowing me to present today. The future of farming. I'm going to be talking about climate change and the future of farming. So please do your seatbelts up. This is going to be a fast and bumpy ride. First of all, the theme for today is growing resilience. But I ask the question, growing resilience to what? We know that climate change is impacting already, and it's interacting with a whole range of environmental policy and behavioural changes context as well. And I ask the question, really, are we talking about resilience or resistance? So I would just like to ask yourselves, where are you coming from? Are you talking about building resilience to the future, or an element of resistance to maintain a status quo, a business as usual? And I'm going to challenge you to think about your risk perceptions as well. And I am immensely, acutely aware of the conversations we had this morning about the risks to do with anxiety to do with climate change. I'm going to paint quite a dark picture in a minute, but also hopefully going to shed some light on the real solutions and positivity that can exist to help us get through the challenges the future will bring. You know all this already. The oceans are warming. 2023 was a record level of temperature in our sea surface temperatures. Things are definitely changing. We know that the ice is melting. What concerns me particularly is the lack of ice in the Arctic, and that is going to change the thermodynamics of how our global systems, our climatic systems work. And a new term for you, Greenlandification, and it's got nothing to do with what's going on in Greenland at the moment. This is the surface of the East Antarctic ice sheet starting to behave like the surface of Greenland. If the East Antarctic ice sheet melts, 52-metre sea level rise. Just picture what that does to the world's coastlines. We know the Earth is warming. This isn't new for you. You've all seen this already before. But where science is taking us is a better understanding of what the consequences are in terms of what it means to the flow and speed of the jet stream. And this is vital for us in the UK to understand, to know how this change in the climate drives the patterns of the jet stream and how that affects the passage of low and high pressure systems, because that's the weather that we will be dealing with in the future, and you as farmers will have to be working with in the future. We're also in the middle of an extinction. Biodiversity is in real problems, and the background rate is 1,000 times more than the current sort of background rate. So this isn't just a human predicament we're talking about, this is a biodiversity, this is life on Earth predicament that we're talking about. And despite all the knowledge that we've had for decades and decades now about the consequences of climate change, our emissions are still increasing. And agriculture, I'm afraid to say, is a major player in that. The whole food system accounts for about 1/3 of all total emissions. But this is an opportunity for us. If we can reduce that level of emissions, then we can help agriculture become part of the solution, not part of the problem. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain this, because this one's really important. This is a balance. On the one hand, we have the emissions due to human activity. As I've just said, they're going up. We also have emissions from natural ecosystems, and as the world warms, they are going to go up as well. Meanwhile, on the other side, nature's been helping us for all along. Nature has absorbed about 50% of all of our emissions into the land and the sea. But currently, that capacity is decreasing, and we are at serious risk of exceeding a tipping point. Now, I would argue that agriculture can play a role in helping to counter what we call a positive feedback loop. And let's be absolutely clear, a positive feedback loop is not a good thing. It just makes things worse in an environmental sense. So if agriculture can reduce its emissions by, say, 10%, if the food system can reduce its emissions by about 10%, then we can help resolve a lot of this balance. We can bring things back into balance. So what does a 2-degree temperature rise look like in the future? Well, we've got a set of animations that can help illustrate this. So what you're about to see is a plant heat stress indicator. It's a count of number of days above 25 degrees in a year. And it starts from 1961 using observed weather data and goes through from 2023 using climate projection data. So as you'll notice, I've put up a benchmark here. Some of you, probably most of you too young to remember 1976, but that was considered a heat wave year. And as we go forwards into the future, you can see the spatial variation in where plant heat stress may occur, and also the temporal variation. Some years are potentially quite good, some years maybe a little bit more, shall we say, risky. We're just coming up to 2022, we missed it if you blinked. That was the year when we had our heat wave. So that helps put it into context. We're now into climate projection area. This is for a 2-degree temperature rise, and where there's about 2% wetter as well. And as you'll notice, as we go into the future, we start to get a bit of a continental effect coming in from north of France and affecting the level of high temperature days. So these are the count of the number of days above 25 degrees. So what will farmers have to be prepared for? The good news is, amongst all that, there will be some good years. There will be some seasons where growing is positive. The conditions can be right, but we are also likely to see a lot more in terms of extreme weather events. And learning how we're going to cope with that is going to be a major challenge. As the atmosphere warms up, it can hold more moisture. So we're going to have heavier precipitation events, more storms carrying more energy, stronger winds, and that's going to cause all sorts of problems. So learning how we can find that balance between making the best of the conditions when they are good, but dealing with the consequences when they're bad is going to be a major challenge for us. And key to that is the water availability. Now, one thing I should really point out, one thing that gives me most concern is the probability of having 2 bad years in a row. Your businesses can take shocks, say a 1 in 10 year type shock or a 1 in 6 year type shock. Can you take 2 bad years in a row? My grandfather was a farmer up near Mansfield, and he always used to say 2 bad years in a row, do something different. So we need to be able to develop that capacity to predict forward to understand when those 2 bad years in a row may occur. As I say, water is going to be central to what we can actually physically do in terms of land use management in the future. So what you're seeing here is just, oh, by the way, you're the first people to see this, is maps of what we call climatic water balance. This is precipitation in and evapotranspiration out. And this is for a baseline period from 1960 to 1989. And then if we step forwards into more recent periods, we can start to see where there have been areas that have shifted from water surplus to water deficit. Not surprisingly, in the winter months, we've got plenty of water. In the spring and summer, we're in a little bit of deficit. And if we go forwards into the future, the near future through to 2050, we start to see areas of the country where, like for example, September, we go from areas of a moderate water surplus to quite a strong deficit. And more importantly, the one that happens in May, because that's a key year for crop growth, key month for crop growth. And so we start to see areas that go from a moderate deficit to a strong deficit. So in other words, our crops are going to be more likely to be water stressed in the future. And unfortunately, that situation only gets worse as we get towards the 2050s through to 2080s. So going back to the question, what will farmers need to be prepared for? That excess of water through the winter is likely to cause problems with soil workability at the back end of the season, back end of the year, and in the spring as well. And we saw that particularly after Storm Babbitt and the east coast of Scotland, where soils were just absolutely saturated all through from autumn into the following spring. But we also have to deal with a lot of water scarcity as well. So the deluge or the drought type scenarios, and that could be within the same year or possibly within the same season as well. So learning how we can cope with those sort of conditions and make the best of the good growing conditions as well. There are a range of dilemmas as well, in that warmer temperatures might mean we have a longer growing season, or we can start our field operations a bit earlier in the year. But if we've got saturated soils or soils that are too wet for workability, then how can we make the use of what will happen above ground in terms of things like grass growth, when the soils are maybe still unworkable and you can't put animals out, etc. And similarly, warmer temperatures are likely to drive crops through their growth stages quicker. So a great amount of work going on within science and learning new varieties that are able to cope with a range of future possibilities. And another options are things like soil root architecture in terms of how they might be able to develop to access water in the spring deeper down because of potential water scarcity issues. Climate change also presents another dilemma in terms of land capability for agriculture, and that it might actually improve the quality of the land in some areas, particularly areas where soil wetness is a limitation at the moment, but conversely, where soil water limitations may actually reduce land capability as well. And that's likely to drive some changes in terms of what land is used for and managed. And there is a risk, a perverse outcome, if you like, that increasing land capability might drive land use change. And that might happen on soils that are high in soil organic matter and high in soil carbon, risking release of that, and that will only exacerbate climate change as well. But I believe there are lots of reasons to be optimistic. There will be opportunities if we are forewarned, and I'll talk a little bit about science of foresight in a minute. But understanding what the threats are means that we can develop solutions now. And as I say, I will repeat, there will be some good years in the future that we have to make hay whilst the sun shines to buffer against potential shocks that might happen in other seasons or other years. And also with opportunities to revise, transform the food system. And one option may be, instead of just in time, shift to a just in case, build up our resilience by having large amounts of nationally held stores based on those better productive years. There are new emerging markets, and I would strongly urge you to have a look at a project we're running at the James Hutton Institute called Hydroglen, where we're using solar, biogas and wind to produce hydrogen for local consumption. So it's not just about producing food, we can produce energy and food at the same time. And with our remarkable computing abilities, integrated data sets, ability to use remote sensing, satellite data, drones, link sensors, we can monitor what happens on farm at a very high resolution and apply modeling for the future using climate projections to explore what the solutions may be. I'm going to go back, bear with me. We have a remarkable capability in the UK to develop a new culture of data sharing. It was discussed quite a bit over the last couple of days about how we can work better between science and farmers to collaboratively share our data to improve modeling so that we can understand the consequences of climate change in the future better, but it requires a bit of a cultural shift. And to help with that, we've developed a new set of decision support tools so that we can assess what the climate change impacts can be at a field scale. So this is a new product we have called Our Smart Farm, and it allows farmers, you, to be able to enter basic management data, and then we can calibrate our crop models to understand. We can then run simulations under future climate projections and provide that data back to you so that you can explore and you can experiment on the laptop rather than just on the field. We don't have time to do that. We need these sort of capabilities now rather than wait through experimentation in the field. And we can develop that if everybody in this room, if all farmers provided data on what you do with your crops, then we can put that into these models and produce national maps of crop yield under future projections so we can understand. Other capabilities, high resolution data so you can look at the variation within your fields, so you can plan better, apply climate projections to understand what the flow of your water might be, and how crop simulation models can tell you what the impacts of climate change will be based on your own data. I'm very conscious I've run out of time. So growing resilience, new opportunities, fundamentally changing the food system for environmental and human health has to be a part of that, and farming can be part of that solution as well. And as Jack Bober was talking about this morning, sort of redefining the narrative from agriculture being part of the problem to becoming part of the solution. You remember that balance diagram that I showed, and that if farming and the food system can reduce its emissions by even a fairly small amount, 5%, 10%. Just imagine what that does to that balance to bring our global ecosystems and our food system back into balance. And what excites me most is the opportunities for new funding streams whereby the supply chain, the private sector, can work with government funding to help you transform, to de-risk change, to enable you to do the change so you don't have to take the financial hit. This, I think, is the future. And without doing this, then we're not going to be able to adapt quickly enough to the threats of climate change. I am going to skip the next one because I'm out of time, but it's also a little bit too sobering. So, thank you very much, conference, for your time. Thank you.